Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice Podcast. The Heart of Hospice Podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is being sponsored by bkbooks.com. BK Books helps care teams and families understand what to expect at the end of life. Created by Barbara Carnes, these trusted booklets and videos explain the physical and emotional changes of dying with warmth and clarity. Whether you're guiding others or caring for someone you love, BK Books brings understanding that eases fear and fosters peace. Explore our compassionate resources at bkbooks.com.
This week's episode features end-of-life doula and author Diane Button in a reflective conversation about the lessons we can all learn from the dying. Diane Button is a lead instructor for the End-of-Life Doula Certificate Program at the University of Vermont through the Larner College of Medicine. She's also the author of several best-selling books, including The Letterbox, Dear Death, and the Dear Death Companion Workbook, as well as the book she co-authored called The Doula Toolkit. All the books explore topics related to death and dying, as well as how to live fully and find meaning in our lives each and every day. Diane runs a nonprofit foundation, and she's a founding partner of the Bay Area End-of-Life Doula Alliance in Northern California. It's a group of 4 doulas who work together to support the dying and their caregivers in the Bay Area community. Diane's newest book is What Matters Most: Lessons the Dying Teach Us About Living. The book highlights the deep grace, humility, and awareness that comes from working with people at the end of life. The book is filled with stories of people at the end of life and the lessons that she and her colleagues learned. Diane does offer a warning that the book might be a little too tender for someone who's just experienced a grief event. And she shares one of the stories that impacted her the most and the lessons she learned from it. Diane also tells a personal story about her grandpa, Charlie, and how it led her into working with the dying. One of her favorite stories from the book is about a 6-year-old girl and pink glitter. Pink glitter. And she's going to share the lesson to be learned from that little girl and her experience with her care. One of the unique and special things included in Diane's book is a list of questions she calls the final checklist. It's a great way to help us learn what matters most to ourselves. You don't have to be dying to use the list of questions or to get benefit from it. The start of the year and this is the beginning of the year for us, or even the start of the month, is the perfect time to start using this list for yourself. So you might want to check that out and give it a try. You can buy a copy of the book for yourself or someone you care about at most major booksellers, and you can find it at dianebutton.com. So stay tuned for this interview with Diane Button. There's a lot to learn. Diane, welcome back to the Heart of Hospice Podcast. It's so great to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you again, too, and great to be here.
Oh, we've got lots to talk about today. Lots of good stuff, new stuff, your new book coming out. So we're going to start with an icebreaker question that I always like to sneak in. I want you to tell me in one word. Most guests can't do this in one word, but tell me in one word how you feel about your work.
Calm. Isn't that weird?
I
feel calm.
Especially
Yeah.
after you just finished writing a book and now you're launching.
I know. That's kind of why I'm surprised that that's the word that's coming to me. But I've just felt really calm lately. And I feel like, this is the message that I needed to bring out into the world. And I just feel really peaceful and good about it. So I'm going to go with calm.
Very nice. Would you use that word to describe your doula work as well? Do you feel a sense of calm when you're working with people at end of life?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when I'm on the education side and training new doulas, I always say, try to always be the calmest person in the room. I think that's kind of a doula skill, to just remember that if you're calm, you're going to bring calm, and you can hold the space a lot better when we're all calm.
Yeah, I like that. Other people feed off the calm energy that you provide.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like that. That was a good question for you. I'm glad I chose that one.
Well, thank you.
Well, I am so excited to celebrate with you and talk about your new book, What Matters Most? Lessons the Dying Teach Us About Living. Tell me about the book and who should be reading this book.
Well, the book came about after I had written a couple other books for mostly people in the end-of-life field. I'd written an article for Maria Shriver for her Sunday paper, and it was titled 10 Lessons the Dying Teach Us About Living. And that article went viral. And Maria Shriver reached out to me and asked me to write this book for people in the general public to maybe understand what our work is like as end-of-life doulas, and maybe some of the lessons that I'd learned working with people at end of life. So that's kind of how it came to be. And it was really written for anyone who feels like life might be moving too fast, like they might not be pausing to contemplate what matters most, or maybe not pausing to live more intentionally or think about their legacy. It's kind of a big pause. That's how I look at this book. It's filled with stories, all from people at end of life, but the stories all end with a life lesson that myself or one of my colleagues got from our clients at end of life. So it's very purposeful. So I think it's for anybody kind of seeking, it's for caregivers and just people who, want to live with more purpose and more presence.
I think we could all use a pause these days.
No doubt.
So I want to ask you this. Whenever we talk about a book that is related to end-of-life issues and dying and contemplating living, things like that, we always talk about if there's somebody who should not be reading it because sometimes grief overwhelm is very real. What would you tell a reader, a potential reader of your book, who might be grieving a recent loss? Is this the book for them?
That's a really thoughtful question and a really important question, and I really appreciate you asking that. Obviously, first of all, it's always important for people to tend to their own hearts first. And so I think if you've recently lost someone you love, this might stir your heart in tender places. It might bring things up because grief is unpredictable. It can make you laugh one moment and cry the next. And I think the book is a lot like that. I think what you find in the pages isn't meant to take your grief away or to just offer tidy little answers, but it's more of a companion. So it could help people understand that they're not alone and that, there are ways to process grief, and there are a lot of other people living through grief. That is part of the book. But I do think there are certain times that if you picked this book up and you felt like it was a little bit too tender for you, that it might be worth waiting for until you've processed your grief and you feel a little bit more ready. And the beautiful part of the book is that because it's all short stories, you can try one on and, feel that. And if that doesn't feel right, then you can pause or you can read a different story. And so there is something for everybody there. But I do really believe that we have to honor our grief first and foremost.
I like the way you put that. Tend to our own grief first. We always go back to that old put your oxygen on first before you try to help someone else. So tending to your own grief first, tend to yourself first, seems such compassionate advice. Seems such a smart piece of advice. I like that. So the structure of the book is stories. You said you built it originally on 8 stories, and then it grew to 28.
Yeah, well, it was actually 8 chapters that it was going to be. But then as we were writing it and editing it, we were realizing that each story had such a powerful message that we decided to break it down into short stories that you can read one in 10 minutes and just kind of absorb that nugget of wisdom from the person that we're reading about, and then put the book down for a while. It's not really one of those books that I think you'd read in one session. You'd kind of take it bit by bit. So I was really grateful when we got to the point that we divided it up into shorter stories.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I think bite size is really great these days. We are all really challenged when it comes to time management and demands on our time. But if you're a caregiver or an end-of-life worker or an end-of-life doula, a lot of times your time is fragmented already and you're pulled in different directions. I also think it gives you a chance. You read one of the stories and you can gauge where your emotions and your response are at that moment. So maybe you read one story and then you set it aside until your emotions feel a little bit different, modulated in a different direction. I like that idea.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, I've obviously been through the book several times, and sometimes one story will hit me, and then sometimes it'll be a different story that kind of where I'm at right now in my life. And so I think that it's one of those books that you could read over and over again, and you're going to get something different out of it every time you read it.
I think that's great. So every chapter in the book is a story, and every story has a lesson at the end of it, which I absolutely love. It's very reflective, very thought-provoking. Which one of the lessons resonates with you the most?
That's a really good question. I think the stories in general that impact me personally the most are the ones that make me pause and contemplate the present moment, like how I'm treating myself, how I'm treating others, like today, right now. I think there's stories that we can look ahead about what maybe we want to do differently in the future. And this could be just where I am right now in life, but I really like looking at the present moment, exercises, lessons, stories that I can say, wow, I could do something differently in my life after reading the story. I can live differently. I can change myself. It's not asking me to do more and be more. It's just asking me to pay attention to the moment. And I really like those stories the most.
Well, and isn't that what so many of us need when we read a book right now? Not to be asked to do more, not to be asked to be more, but to just be present with the thoughts that are offered.
Yeah.
Was there a story that you wanted to include in the book, but you didn't?
Yeah, there were a lot. And also, since I've written the book, now almost every client has a story. Their family has a story. I mean, I feel like there's another book in me now, which I would have never said even just a few months ago. But now that this one's about to come out, I'm realizing there's so many stories. And there's this one story recently that it was a young client. She was only 39 years old, and she had been sick for over half of her life. And she told me one day, we were just talking, and she said, you know what? I think I got it right. And she was just explaining that she thought that she'd lived more in her 39 years on the planet than most people who live twice that long live. She felt like she just got it right. So I asked her, what did you do differently? What did you do to get it right? And she said, as soon as she was diagnosed, she changed instantly. And she was only about 20 years old when she was diagnosed. And she said, I was a perfectionist. I followed, every rule. I had a set plan, a rigid life plan all through college. And she was just feeling like she always needed to be so focused on her goals, like all the time. But then when she got sick, she changed. And she said it was kind of instantaneous. And she told me all of a sudden she was happy getting B's in college. And even if she got a C, she was okay because that meant she showed up and she was doing the best that she could at that time. And she said this one line to me. She said one day, don't seek perfection, seek experiences. And that really stuck with me. And I know maybe that's just something I needed to hear recently, but I thought that was a really beautiful way of expressing how she changed.
As you work as an end-of-life doula, you're not going to do anything but accumulate more stories.
I know.
Yeah.
And also in this book, there's a lot of my colleagues' stories as well, because, we get together and we share stories. So just when you think about collecting stories from just me, but also from so many of us in the field, there's just so many beautiful stories that come out all the time. So yeah, I think we've got some books ahead. I guess we do anyway.
I like that. Listen, every person who's dying has a story. If we bother to pause and listen.
It's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you started out as a volunteer, as a young person, maybe a teenager from what I remember reading, working with residents of a convalescent home. How did that work capture your heart and the intention that grew into a career for you? What was that work like and how did it affect you?
Well, even as a teenager, I was drawn to working with people who are aging and their stories. I worked in the kitchen and I always found my way out of the kitchen and into the residents' rooms. I'd often feed them and just sit at the end of their bed. And I just found them so fascinating and so full of wisdom. And, I always thought to myself, they're kind of looking back while I'm looking ahead in life. I'm at one end of the lifespan and they were at the other. And that just really stuck with me, even as a teenager. And I got to know them. I knew their names, their birthdays, their families, their grandkids, their stories. And it really, really touched me. And I think really drew me into the work. I didn't realize it at the time that that's where my life would go. But I do realize looking back that I was really touched by those stories. And I also realized very early on that love and relationships and family were always the most important and the most meaningful topics of everybody's conversation. Obviously now we have digital photographs, right? But back then it was scrapbooking and it was those photo albums that you peeled and stuck photos. And the scrapbooks were so beautifully decorated with buttons and ribbons, all these handcrafted scrapbooks. And I can remember sitting and flipping through them page by page with all the, faded photos of family, pets, vacations, weddings, and everything over the years. So I guess as a kid, my life was ahead of me, but I didn't know. Now that I'm many, many years later, that might have been my first glimpse into what matters most, really. I didn't know it at the time. Yeah.
Wow. So another big influence on your life was your grandpa, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You write about him in the book. How did his story change you?
Yeah. I think he was also a huge turning point. He was a surgeon and he specialized in treating burn victims. So he had witnessed some excruciating pain and loss. And, he definitely grieved over the lives he couldn't save. And I knew him to be a really serious man. He didn't laugh a lot, but he was my hero because he was all about making the world a better place. And I just admired him so much. And he wasn't really fluffy and demonstrative with his touching or like hugs or I love you. There wasn't a lot of that, but I just knew he loved me so much. But he was so serious. And at the end of his life, I was holding him when he died, and he took this big breath, and then he had this huge smile on his face. And it was the biggest smile he'd ever had on his face by far. I mean, it was just this huge smile. And at that moment, it was just such a sort of spiritual and beautiful moment. And the church bells were ringing and there was a breeze blowing. And I just stared at his smile. And I thought to myself, okay, how did he die with that big of a smile on his face? Because I wanted to do that. What do I need to do to live my life so that I can die with a big smile on my face? And that was just another step towards me being curious about end of life, about living well so that you can die well. And I think that was a big stepping stone for me, because soon after that, I started volunteering at hospice, and I started, going back to school to get my master's degree just in counseling, but really to study existential psychology and understand more about meaning in life.
How old were you when your granddad died?
I was 33.
33. Would you say that it changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, it absolutely did. It solidified something in me that was kind of brewing, because I wasn't really working with death and dying and people in that field before that. But I knew when he died that I wanted to study more, and I wanted to learn everything I could about end of life. And it took me a while, because I took classes and I read books and I did everything I could to learn about death and dying. And it really took a while before I got my master's, and then I volunteered in hospice. But I think he changed me and set me on the path to where I am today. Definitely.
That's an incredible legacy for him to leave with you.
Yeah, I wish he knew. I hope he knows.
Yeah. Well, so this is what I'll tell you about, your wish that you would like to be able to die, to have whatever death experience he was having, so that you would die with a smile on your face. I think a lot of that could have been related to the fact that he was lying in the embrace of a very dear granddaughter.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to break for just a minute. This isn't the end of the episode. There's more to come, so stay connected.
When someone you care about is nearing the end of life, it can be hard to know what to expect. BK Books is here to help families, caregivers, and professionals find comfort through understanding. Created by hospice nurse and end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes, these simple, trusted booklets and videos explain what happens when a person is dying, the changes that occur, the signs you can expect, and ways to bring comfort and provide care. With clear, compassionate information, BK Books helps you face one of life's hardest moments with confidence instead of fear. Whether you're supporting a loved one or guiding a family, these resources make a real difference. Resources from BK Books have helped hundreds of thousands of families and healthcare professionals navigate dying with confidence and compassion. People don't die like they do in the movies. Understanding what's happening can bring calm when everything feels uncertain. Explore the trusted guides and learning tools from hospice pioneer Barbara Carnes at bkbooks.com.
So I want you to choose a story for me out of the book, a story with a lesson, and tell me that story. The Cliff Notes version of it, right? But yes.
Okay.
Tell me one of maybe your favorite, the one that speaks to you today.
Okay. The one that's speaking to me today is a story called Pink Glitter. And the reason it speaks to me today is because of the lesson. And so my youngest daughter just recently moved out. So I'm going through a lot of boxes, and I'm kind of experimenting with what I want to keep and what I want to get rid of. So maybe that's why I'm thinking of this story today. But this is a story about a little girl named Rosie. And I met her, she was only 6 years old, and she had terminal cancer. And at first I was just watching her sisters and brothers while she was in chemo treatments. I was kind of support for the family. But then I got to know her over time, and we started painting a lot. She was really into art and just really into painting. So one day we were working on a project together, and I asked her, "What's your favorite color?" And she said, "My favorite color is pink glitter." And I said, "What's pink glitter?" And so she told me about this paint. It's this paint that her grandmother made, and it has sparkles on it and whatnot. And I said, well, do you have any pink glitter? And it turns out that her mom had stored the pink glitter up on a top shelf for special occasions, and they only brought it down every now and then. And so her mom was conversation, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, Rosie's sick, and if there's ever going to be a special occasion, it's today. And I looked at her mom. I started to try to explain to her, say something about pulling the pink glitter, and she got it right away. And she grabbed the paint, and we spent the whole day painting with this pink glitter, and we did a big art project for the family. But the lesson in it is like, use the pink glitter, light the candles, wear the fancy underwear, take the vacation. Like,
Yeah.
don't wait.
Yeah. Use the
know?
fancy dishes.
Yeah. Open the wine, eat the chocolate, whatever it is. But it made me just think about how many things I have like that. Like, oh, I'm going to use this someday when I have friends over, or I'm going to use this someday when I go somewhere. And that story has just really impacted me, especially recently, to just go for it. Like, today's a special day. Right now is a special moment, just being here with you,
I love it that we learned this lesson from a 6-year-old girl who thinks that the words pink glitter are a color.
Exactly.
You have to be a 6-year-old girl to think pink glitter is a color. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I love that too.
So what is the question or the lesson at the end of her story in the book? Do you remember?
The lesson is, don't forget that today is a special day and right now is a special moment.
Right now is a special moment. I love that. So Diane, let's dive in and get a little personal, because this book is all about reflection, introspection. Even though you're reading someone else's story, it's designed to make us think, right? Take a moment, as you say, to pause, to think. So if I were to ask you, what would matter most to you at the end of your life? And of course, this is advanced care planning, is all that is. What would you tell me matters? What would matter most to you at the end of your life?
That's a great question. And it's so important that we do our own work in this field. And that question is making me think the way you said it about advanced care planning, of like, I'm feeling what matters most in my sort of emotional estate rather than my financial estate. You know what I mean? Just what's happening in my heart. And I just know that at the end of my life, it's not going to matter that I got a college degree or my success or achievements or possessions. And even the things that I worry about probably on a day-to-day basis aren't going to matter. And it's really clear to me that I need to let go of that as life goes on, because it isn't the important stuff. What is important to me and what I think will matter most is that I loved well, and that the people I love know that I love them deeply without question. And I'd like to feel like I was able to be loved as well, and that I was kind, and that my presence made life a little bit lighter or a little bit softer or meaningful. Like, I made a difference, like the world is a better place because I was here. That's really important to me. And I also want to have a sense of peace, just like overall peace, not from having a perfect life or anything like that, but from living an authentic one, like true to who I am, what I believe in and what I value, and also like feeling connected to people, of course, but also just to the planet and to my spirituality. Like, I think it's really important at the end of life that I am connected to what feels important, to really resolve everything about my spiritual practice. And so that I have that peace in feeling like there's something else that lives on after. And I think that that's just really important to me.
That's beautifully said. So there are 6 reflective questions in the book. You call them the final checklist, which is hilarious, right? Those of us who have been list makers all our lives, this is the final checklist. It's designed to inspire readers to think about what matters most to them, right? The theme of the book. So can you run through the 6 and tell me what they are? And then I want to know which one is your favorite.
Sure. So let me tell you about the list for real quick. The way that it started was for clients at end of life. And it was created because I kept going to people's houses with this giant list. I mean, probably 100 questions. Of course, I didn't ask them all, and it was probably coming from a place of being new in the field, but I never knew exactly what to ask. And so I was trying to refine my time with my clients so that I could be most efficient. And that's how I came up with these 6 questions of what matters most. And the questions are: who matters most? What matters most? What's left unsaid? What's left undone? What brings you joy in the daytime? And what do you worry about when you're laying awake in bed at night? And I've found that when I ask those questions, I know exactly where I need to go with each client. It's really to the heart of the matter. It really just speaks to who they are, what matters most to them, and maybe what's troubling them, and also helps me understand what's bringing them joy, because part of our work is to remember that people are living fully up until their very last breath. So when we know what matters most, who matters most, and what is joyful for them, we can often find ways to bring those things all together so they can experience as much joy as possible at the end of life.
I was just thinking, reflecting on what you said about the last question, which is what keeps you awake at night? Is that right?
Yeah.
I really like that question. I think that as end-of-life workers, sometimes we don't dig deeply enough with people who are dying because we don't want to deal with their emotions. We don't have time to deal with their emotions, or maybe we just don't feel like it. We don't have the patience to deal with their emotions today. But I think there are things that they want to say if they can find somebody receptive to say it to.
Yeah. It's actually my favorite question, because if I know what's worrying about somebody when they're laying awake in bed at night, then I understand what the suffering is.
Right.
I'm going to know, are you holding on to a story that needs some healing, or a broken relationship, or are you afraid of the pain and suffering and dying? Are you worried about finances or your children, or accumulated stuff that you're leaving for others to go through, or maybe some spiritual distress? If I know what somebody's worried about, and that's just one question, so it doesn't take a lot of time, it could lead to a bigger conversation. But once you know what somebody's worrying about, I think that's when healing can happen.
I like that. So Dame Cicely Saunders talked about treating whole pain.
Right.
Right? So it's mind, body, spirit, psychological, psychosocial, physical, spiritual pain. And all of that adds up because we are whole people as human. All of those different components add up. So she talked about that. That last question, asking about what keeps you awake at night, what worries you, is a great way to suss out what type of pain they're having. You said that. If they have a spiritual issue, or if they have a relationship that's broken or dysfunctional. That's just a way. I hate to say this. I don't want to give it a nursing term, but that's an assessment. Right. But it encourages them to think and to maybe reflect in on what's happening at that moment, at that stage of things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. A lot of hospice workers and just people who are in our field are really stretched for time, and occasionally maybe you would want to dig in a little bit deeper, but you don't have the time to do so. But with that one question, you can avoid exploring all those areas of pain that Cicely Saunders talks about, and maybe just hone in on the one thing that might be most important for that particular client on that particular day.
So when you use those questions with clients, did you get them to write their answers if they were able, or did you prefer to have just a conversation with them? How did you employ the questions?
Usually it's a conversation at first. It's part of a session. And I don't even ask them in order. I just want to make sure that I ask them all. But over time, if I have a long-term client for a few months, oftentimes we do that together as a weekly exercise. So they'll ask themselves those questions before I get there. And so they'll be reflecting on what's changing in their life and what's important in their life at that time. And it just kind of keeps the conversation going, and it keeps them in the present moment, aware and paying attention to what might be troubling them. So it's really helpful. And I actually do it myself too. I ask myself the questions once a month and I write it all out every month.
Do you really?
Yeah. I call it an emotional detox. It just feels like cleansing, like a clean slate every single month.
Do you find that your answers differ from month to month quite a bit?
Yeah. I mean, who matters most doesn't change all the time. Some of those kind of questions, but what matters most does, because life changes fast. And so what matters one month might be different in another. And what I'm worrying about definitely changes, so I think it's good to tune in and just practice.
I love that, the way you said that. I like to just tune in and practice. So for somebody with a serious illness, the grief emotions, just being able to ask themselves those questions each week. And I think even the what matters most would change a lot as their physical body changes, as the disease trajectory moves forward. Those things that matter and the things that worry them may change drastically. It may change from something that they're worried about with the disease to a family member that they're leaving behind when they die.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Even the question, what brings you joy, changes a lot at the end of life, because, sometimes starts out people are leaving their house and they're still living life, and then maybe they're not leaving their homes anymore, and then they might not be leaving their bedrooms anymore. And so those change all the time. So the idea of still being able to try to find joy in the moments of the ordinary day become really important, and they shift. And so paying attention to those, and also another part of it is paying attention to what time of day a person really feels their best. Because if you can match what brings them joy to with what time of day they feel the best, then you have the greatest opportunity for them to really have a full experience. You're not having visitors when they're tired, that kind of thing.
So these questions aren't really just reflective. They're something that is actionable inside getting those answers.
Absolutely. I think the initial part of it is reflective because it's kind of a dig into where they are currently. But once we establish where they are currently and what's important to them in all 6 of those areas, then we can take action to help them to have as full of a life as possible.
That's beautiful. I love that. Your favorite question is the one about what's keeping you awake at night. How would you answer that this week? Can I ask you that?
Yes, you can. That's a personal question, but I'll answer it.
And if it's too personal, we can switch to another one, Diane.
No
problem.
No, it's one of those ones where, wow, that really even just asking myself, that really just cuts to what's happening in life at this moment in time.
Right.
I think as an overall heading, I think I worry a lot about how I'm spending my time. And I think that's actually gotten to be a bigger worry recently, just because I've been working a lot these last few years. And, whenever I pause to think about how busy I am, which I don't even really like that word, I realize that on the other side of that, everything I do, I'm also sacrificing something else. And so I've been really kind of thinking about the time I spend with my husband, my kids, my friends, and even by myself on self-care. And so I think that's my biggest worry lately, is that I'm just too busy at a time in life when I'd really like to be slowing down. It reminds me of a client who, in the book, her story's there, but she had a saying right at the end of her life. She said to me, "Money comes and goes, but time only goes."
Oh.
And I love that.
Yeah.
That really touched me and made me pause to think about, wow, that is true. Time does only go. And I just want to make sure I use it wisely. So I would say that's a big worry of mine.
That makes me think myself, I have to say.
Yeah. But if you pay attention to it, then you can do something about it. And I think that's part of the reflective piece. It's like, okay, I'm identifying this as an issue, so now I have the opportunity to do something about it.
Right. There's something about reflecting on it and writing it down.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's even interesting to look back, because if you look back, you'll see that how you've changed so much over years, and how many things have happened in your life, and how many worries you've processed through, and how many joys you've experienced, and how many people you love. And it's really awesome to be able to look back.
How long have you been doing the questions for yourself and asking those?
About 3.5 years or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Have you been using them for clients all that time as well?
Yeah, that's about when I first figured it out. After I had been a practicing doula for about 3 years, I think I finally tuned in. And that's when I started narrowing the questions down and asking them of myself. And I ask my friends a lot too when we're together. I just ask them one of the questions, and then that becomes our conversation for a while.
So do you have, this is going to sound crazy, do you have doula friends, or are these normal friends that you get to answer these questions with you?
My doula friends love it because they're doulas and you can talk to them about anything.
Sure.
And my normal friends, there's certain people, there's certain people that you have, certain friends that you can talk to certain things about and take that deep dive with. It's not for everybody, and I know that. So
Right. I have friends like that too. Being a hospice nurse, you have to pick and choose your subjects with different friends.
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Diane, I am excited for this book to come out. What Matters Most, Lessons the Dying Teach Us About Living. How are people going to be able to find it? How can they get a hold of it and buy a copy for themselves?
Well, you can go to my website, dianebutton.com, and it will send you to places you can buy the book, but it's basically available everywhere books are sold, starting September 16th.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about it. It's a beautiful book. It truly is, and I wish you all success.
Thank you. It's really good to see you.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.